Jet Greaves came within 10 seconds of his first NHL shutout and keeps making the case that he wants to be the next Blue Jackets franchise goalie. We're going to talk about that. Plus, there's a contract extension to talk about, and it's not the one that we were expecting. So that's all coming up on today's Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, and to give you the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team, and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get things started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms and over on YouTube. I also have to let you know today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers place a $5 bet, and if that bet wins or loses, you're going to get started with $200 in bonus bets. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Let's talk about, well, we've got a lot to talk about today. Kind of a grab bag of episodes today. I want to talk about the game a little bit. I want to talk about goaltending a little bit. And Zach Aston Reese has a contract extension, which is not the contract extension I think any of us were expecting, quite frankly. So we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And probably a little bit about Matthew Olivier and when his inevitable extension is going to hit as well. So let's start off. Let's talk about the game because it was a little bit stressful, but ultimately a very good game. Blue Jackets win 2-1. It is 2-0 with literally, I think, 10.4 seconds left. Jet Greaves had an incredible game. We're going to talk a lot about Jet Greaves in this opening segment, just so everyone is aware. But goals from Adam Fantilli, who has a nice little 5-game point streak going. Goal from Cole Sillinger, who hadn't scored in 8 or 9 games. But like the real story is Jet Greaves. 31 of 32 saves for a .969 save percentage. Brings his season save percentage so far to a .906. He is 2-1, I believe, in the 2-1-2. So 2 overtime losses, 1 regulation loss, and 2 wins. He's developing excellently. We all know I'm a big fan of Jet Greaves on this show. Like that's not a surprise for literally anyone, I don't think. But it is true. And he is a really great story, and he's making his case that the Blue Jackets are struggling with Tarasov. The Blue Jackets were struggling with Elvis kind of on and off this season. I think everyone can agree that he's been pretty inconsistent, and Jet Greaves hasn't come in and, he hasn't got Dustin Wolf numbers, let's say. Dustin Wolf doing excellently in Calgary, and I compare the two because they're both 6 feet or under goalies. Dustin Wolf, former 7th round draft pick. Jet Greaves, undrafted. They're similar-ish stories. Jet Greaves hasn't had the dominance in the AHL that to the extent that Dustin Wolf has had, but I think it's interesting to compare them. So Jet Greaves has not had the immediate impact that Dustin Wolf has had up in Calgary, who he's been very, very good. But kid can play. Kid's a gamer. The Blue Jackets called him up because they didn't have a goalie that they could rely on every single night. And Jet Greaves was not incredible in all of his games, but he was exceptional in his first game of the season, which they lost in overtime, 2 goals on 37 shots. Had 3 so-so appearances, an overtime loss, a loss, and then the win versus Montreal. And then a great win against St. Louis. So, it's not like he's been blowing teams out of the water, but he's been serviceable. He's been fine. The Anaheim game, I don't think he was very good. But all the other games, I'm like, you know what? I'm fine with this. So Jet Greaves is proceeding as expected. Well, not as expected, but proceeding as planned. I don't think anyone expected, an undrafted, overage goalie to come to make his NHL debut, even, but he's been, like I said, he's been great for this team, and he's going to make the goaltending conversation a lot harder, which we'll talk about in a little bit here. But some other stuff I want to talk about. Blue Jackets power play continues to roll. They went 1 for 2 on the night. They continue to sneak up in the standings. I think they're sitting at 9th overall at the minute, or they were last time I checked. They're 9th overall, tied with the Ottawa Senators at 24.1%. But when you consider that last season the Blue Jackets finished, I think, 32nd they finished 31st at 15.1%. So they have improved the power play almost 10%. And obviously they're on a hot streak right now. The season's not over yet, but the power play clicking without Monahan is good as well. Fantilli has been stepping in for Monahan and has been doing, in my opinion, a pretty good job, quite frankly. Again, scored a goal in the most recent game, has, I think, 3 points. No, just 2 points. Technically 3 points if you count the goal he scored after Monahan left with the injury, and I would like to count that. So in the 2 games in a period without Monahan, Fantilli on that top line, he's got 2 goals and an assist, is a +4 in that time, and has 10 shots over those 3 games as well. Weirdly, only played 16:36 against St. Louis. That was a really balanced game in terms of time on ice. Marchenko led all forwards with 17:36, and then the lowest was Kevin Labanc at 10:47. So they've really spread out the ice time in that game, which I think is a really great sign. Less so for the defenseman. Zach played 28 minutes, and then Jay Christensen only played 12. David Severson continues to be in the doghouse a little bit, only 13:03. But honestly, for the most part, pretty good game. Blue Jackets outworked the Blues in both period 1 and period 2. They were outshooting them 26-17 at the start of the third period. Blues pushed in the third period, credit to them. Outshot the Blue Jackets 15-4. Shots finished 32-30 in favor of the Blue Jackets, but Blue Jackets and Tarasov, Blue Jackets and Greaves weathered the storm. Like I said, 1 goal on 32 shots is a pretty good night in anyone's book, and the vibes are good. The Blue Jackets have won 4 games in a row for the first time since, I think, March 2022. And I did see, actually, that was the season where all of the goalies were broken at the end of the season, and so they played Blue Jackets legend JF Berube for a bunch of games. And he won 3 games in a row, and then there was a game before he came in that the Blue Jackets won as well. So that 4-game winning streak, 3 wins came from JF Berube, which is extremely, extremely fun and also funny. I want to keep talking about goaltending, though, because the Blue Jackets sent Daniil Tarasov down to the Monsters for a conditioning stint called Jet Up. We've talked about Jet. Let's talk about how Tarasov did in his conditioning stint. That's coming up in just a second here on Locked on Blue Jackets. First, I want to tell you about FanDuel. From big upsets to game-winning drives, the NFL playoffs are better with FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $200 whether you win or lose. The FanDuel app gives you everything that you need for live bets, same-game parlays, and so much more. So literally, just go to FanDuel.com, sign up, put $5 on the first bet you see. You don't have to win or lose or anything like that. As soon as you put $5 down on anything, you're going to get $200 that you can also spend on whatever you want. So if you want to put money on Adam Fantilli keeping that point streak going, if you want to put money on Zach Werenski winning the Norris, you can do all of that at FanDuel.com. Again, get started with $200 in bonus bets with your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Make this playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to Locked on Blue Jackets. We're talking about goaltending. Again, always, eternally. Daniil Tarasov went down to the AHL a couple of weeks ago. It was reported that he turned down a conditioning stint to the AHL, which he is well within his right to do as as per the CBA of the NHL, and then he continued not to play. I think he had 1 game after that, wasn't great in it. And since then has not played. So you have to play at some point, or you have to accept the fact that, you know, if you're going to play, you're going to be in the AHL for the next little while. So they sent him down. He played 2 games back to back. Yeah, so he played December 28th, which would have been after he was asked to go to a conditioning stint. He said no. Played this game against Boston. The Blue Jackets were shut out 4-0. He had 4 goals on 28 shots. And I think after that, it was really like, well, we can't, like, he hasn't had a game with a save percentage above 900 since October 22nd. Now, he's only played 6 games since then, but his save percentage in those games have been 879, 682, 897, 880, 833, 833, and 857. He has 5 losses and an overtime loss in that span as well. So that's where they are with Tarasov at the minute, and that's why he was sent down for a conditioning stint. He played really well in one game and not so great in the other game, is the thing. So his first game would have been on the Friday. He allowed 5 goals on 30 shots, had an 833 save percentage. The Monsters got shut out 5-0. It wasn't a great game for anyone, but the Blue Jackets needed Tarasov to be perfect in that game, or the Monsters did anyway, and he wasn't. Luckily, he was much improved in the second game. The Monsters won in overtime, 2-1. Owen Sillinger with the overtime game winner for the Monsters, which is a great story. The day after making his NHL debut, he goes back down to Cleveland and shows that he's still got what it takes down there with an overtime game winner. Tarasov's 34 saves on 35 shots in his second game with the Monsters, so it averages out. He has a 908 over those 2 games, 6 goals on 65 shots, I believe that is. I'm doing math on the fly. Yeah, 65 shots, 6 goals. So if that, if you average it out, it doesn't look too bad. They call him back up, which I understand a lot of people were frustrated about, let's say. I saw a lot of people saying, well, why are they doing this? It's the rules. Conditioning stints, I believe you can only go down for 3 games or 14 days, whichever happens first. And I think the Monsters are on the road this weekend, so they didn't want to send Tarasov off with the Monsters and then have to call him back after 1 game. And, it would be too much going on. But they sent him down. He played 2 games. Now he's back. Jet Greaves has gone back down. To send him back down, I believe they now have to put him on waivers, which, if I had to guess, that would be what I think is probably the plan, depending on how Tarasov does in his next start with the Blue Jackets, which is probably going to be tomorrow, I think, against is it the Sharks they play tomorrow? The Flyers. So Blue Jackets play the Flyers tomorrow and then the Sharks on Thursday. 2 teams below the Blue Jackets in the standings. Both should be reasonably good games for the Blue Jackets to throw Tarasov into. Blue Jackets are at home, which always helps in terms of, just the team playing well. Although, that win on the road in St. Louis, and they've got back-to-back wins actually on the road against Pittsburgh and then against St. Louis. But the Blue Jackets need Tarasov to be, again, basically perfect in this game. And if he isn't, then I suspect the next move is going to be waivers. I don't know that a team picks Tarasov up looking at his stats like this season. And like his career stats are better, but he's got 55 games so far in the NHL. He's only got 15 wins. He's got a career save percentage of 896, a goals against average of 356. This season, he's at an 857 save percentage with a goals allowed against average of 4.23. He was great in his very limited rookie season. He played 4 games, had a 937. He had a 908 save percentage last year, which last year, like, that was far and away the best goaltender. He was the best goalie for the Blue Jackets last season, far and away. He was really good in that, like, stretch towards the end of the season. He was one of the best goalies in the NHL in the month of, like, March heading into April, if I remember rightly. So I don't know what's got, like, again, goalies are kind of nonsense sometimes. There is every reason to believe that he'll come back from this stint, play really well against whichever team they start him against, and then he's just back, because again, like, sometimes goalies need a push, sometimes they just figure it out on their own. I do think Tarasov is one of those goalies that, I've talked about this at length on this show, of the Yunus Korpisalo, of the more often he plays, the better he is. And I think Tarasov is the same. I think he's not one of those goalies that can kind of jump in every 2 weeks and play well. He needs to be playing regularly, which is not a great method for ostensibly your backup. I know there was a lot of talk of, can Tarasov take Elvis's spot as the starter this season? A lot of people thought yes, absolutely. And he hasn't taken advantage of this opportunity. So I do think that Tarasov's time in Columbus is running short, save a miraculous bounce back for the second half of the season from him. And I think the organization is really high on Greaves as well. So that doesn't help Tarasov's case. Greaves is really making a name for himself. Was an NHL All-Star last season, I believe, was second in the entire NHL in wins, was phenomenal in the postseason as well. He's been good, but not exceptional this season for the Monsters. He's been great. He's been very good. I don't think he's as exceptional as he was last season. So that, I think, has made Tarasov not necessarily expendable, but we'll see what happens with him, because I do think that this might be his kind of last hurrah. His contract is not unmovable in any way. I think he's making just over $1 million this year. So maybe they keep him to the end of the season. That's the wrong website I'm doing. Great. Maybe they keep him to the end of the season. Don't qualify him. He's an RFA at the end of this season. Wikipedia will not show me how much money he's making. That's fine. So what do you do with it? The problem is that if you're not going to play him, you're going to have to play Elvis. And the problem with playing Elvis is that he's not like the most durable goalie in the world. And yeah, he's making $1,050,000. This season, is an RFA next season, is a UFA the season after that. So we'll see what happens. But it's not looking great for Tarasov. So I don't know what they do. To finish my thought on Elvis before I distract myself with my own Googling, Elvis is not the most durable goalie in the world. He, I don't think, has ever played more than about 45 games a season. I'm just pulling. Okay. In 21-22, he played 15. He started 56 games for the Blue Jackets. That's his career high. Last season, he started 40. Which seems fine, except he was supposed to be the starter in that season. The 56-game season, I believe, was he was still doing the 1A, 1B thing with Korpisalo at that point. But he misses a lot of time with injuries, with illnesses. I think he's missed 5 or 6 games already this season. He is on pace to start about 55 to 60 games, depending on, obviously how things go, whether he starts to fall, whether Tarasov pulls it together. But like, I am wary to rely on Elvis playing every single game. And if they don't trust Tarasov, Elvis is going to have to play more. And like, that's why it's in their best interests to get Tarasov going, or replace Tarasov with someone who can, reasonably play 30 to 40 games a season, probably 30 to 35 games a season. And I don't know whether they'll do that. Tarasov is, I don't think he's extremely tradable, but he is definitely tradable, But who do you bring in? Do you bring in a veteran on a 1-year deal? Do you try and look for someone that's going to challenge Elvis? Elvis is still making almost $5.5 million for 2 seasons after this one. Like, there's a lot going on in the goaltending for Columbus, and there's not a lot going on in terms of goaltending movement around the league right now. So we'll see, I guess. The Blue Jackets have a new contract though, which is exciting. It's not a goaltender, but and it's also not the one I was expecting. So I want to talk about that a little bit in just a second here. We're going to talk about Zach Aston Reese and the impact that he's made since coming in off of waivers at the beginning of the season. That's coming up on today's Locked On Blue Jackets. First, I'm going to tell you about Rocket Money. Now, I don't know about you, but I am constantly signing up for like free trials of streaming services and then watching 3 episodes of something and then forgetting it exists. And then I end up paying for it for like 6 months because I'm stupid and forget that it exists. And that's why Rocket Money is so good for me, because it makes it really easy to track down all of these forgotten subscriptions. It's like having a personal assistant for your finances. Rocket Money is a personal finance app that helps find and cancel your unwanted subscriptions, monitors your spending, and helps lower your bills so you can grow your savings. It brings everything together in one place, whether that's subscriptions, your spending habits, or even the goals that you want to hit this year. Rocket Money has over 5 million users and has saved a total of $500 million in canceled subscriptions, saving members up to $740 a year when using all of the app's premium features. I really love the subscription tracker. Like I said, I've used it to cancel services that I wasn't using anymore because I forgot that they existed, and I've already saved a ton of money. Plus, with their goals feature, I've been able to automatically set aside money for my future, which means there's no more stressing about budgeting every month. Cancel your unwanted subscriptions and reach your financial goals faster with Rocket Money. Go to rocketmoney.com/lockedon today. That's rocketmoney.com/LOCKEDON. rocketmoney.com/lockedon. Welcome back to Locked On Blue Jackets. Let's talk about Zach Aston Reese, who didn't finish the game against St. Louis. He blocked a shot, left the game. Only played 11:25 of the game, but has been, since he came in, honestly, a pretty good addition for the Blue Jackets in the bottom 6. Like, and this was always going to be a struggle, was they're not going to be able to replace Johnny Gaudreau with a similar player. They're going to have to hope that someone steps up into that spot, becomes an elite top line winger, and then they can just kind of plug the holes up the lineup, And I think they've had the success with that top line, Voronkov and Marchenko. Kent Johnson is coming into his own. Like Adam Fantilli, not an elite winger, but has been making massive steps. Kent Johnson has taken steps forward. Like I said that name, Cole Sillinger has taken steps forward. So they really needed guys to like step up into the lineup. Zach Aston Reese was a waivers pickup. He's making, I think, $775K a year, and he will be making the same again next year for the Blue Jackets as well. He's only got 11 points in 42 games, but he is a player that, like, you don't look at Zach Aston Reese for scoring. You look at Zach Aston Reese to make things difficult for the other team. He's one of those players that kind of like a Sean Corrali, and they've had some success playing together this season in the bottom 6. Same with Olivier. You just kind of throw them out there, and they tire out the other team. He's been playing on the PK as well, and has been doing quite well there. So I like this. I like this extension. It's like basically no risk or reward. Like I said, it's $775K next season. The cap is going to go up. The Blue Jackets are not even almost, cap strapped in any way. Yes, they're going to have to save money for, Voronkov needs a new contract this summer. They want to extend Olivier. Fantilli's going to need a new contract soon. Like Johnson and Marchenko especially are going to get big raises from the contracts they signed this summer in a couple of years. So, but it's a 1-year sub-$1 million deal for a player that has had an impact on this team. He, I think, is the late season edition or the late summer edition that I've liked the most. James Van Riemsdyk has been, I'm sure, great. James Van Riemsdyk is great in the room, and by all accounts, really great guy. Good veteran. All of those buzzwords. Hasn't had the impact that I was hoping he would on the offense. Continues to play in the top 6 anyway, just because of injuries, etc. And Kevin Labanc has been fine. I've liked Kevin Labanc more than Dean Everson has, which is, I think, not hard. But Zach Aston Reese, I think, has come in and has really made an impact on this team and has, especially the penalty kill, which has kind of been up and down all season, but I like Zach Aston Reese's game a whole lot. And by all accounts, again, fun in the room. The guys like him. He seems to gel well with the rest of the team. And that's not nothing, you know? You look at Vancouver, for example, where apparently Elias Pettersson and JT Miller can't stand each other. And, you can have all the skill in the world, but if you can't play nicely with others, there's going to be problems, So, Zach Aston Reese, great addition. Not going to move the needle too much, but you don't need him to, does exactly what he's supposed to do. He is a fourth liner, potentially he is a sometimes third liner. He's doing exactly as he's told. He is not a complete liability on the ice, which frankly is all I ask for from the fourth line, Like I said, I am surprised that this contract extension came through because it wasn't the one I was expecting. Mathieu Olivier, I feel like every single game is doing something to add another like 500,000 onto his AAV. Hasn't scored in a minute here. He got an empty netter against St. Louis the last time these two teams faced off against each other, but he's already doubled his career high in goals. He's got 10 goals. 17 points in 43 games, which again, for a guy that, I had considered just a face puncher, essentially, he's doing amazing. He's at a new career high in points as well. His previous high was 15, which he had with his first year with the Blue Jackets. Now he's on 17 points, on pace for just under a 20-goal season and just under a 40-point season, I believe. I think he's on pace for, if I can do math real quick, I think he's on pace for like 36 or 37 points this season, which would be so far above his career high. He's going to get paid. We just don't know how much he's going to get paid. People are saying like 3 times 3 for him. I would honestly, I might give him like $2 million for 4 years as opposed to $3 million for 3 years. I'm hesitant to give him like a long contract. I know people are like, lock him up. But then what happens is you get something like the Pierre Engvall deal, which I believe is like $3.5 million for the next 7 years that Lou Lamoriello signed him to. And as much as I love Mathieu Olivier, and he has, he's turned into a leader on this team. He's wearing an A with Monahan out, which fully deserved. He's added some offense to his game, which is great. His game is not designed to be like he's not going to have a long and effective career. I don't think and that's fine. I just don't think his game is particularly well suited to playing, well into his 30s. And he's, I want to say 27 right now. Yeah, 27 right now. So 3 years, that'll take him up to 30. That feels about right for me. Like, again, I could argue 1 or 2 more years, maybe. Definitely, I could argue 1 year. I don't know that I would give him 5 years. That'll take him to being 32, and like you're really kind of pushing at the edge there. But between $2 and $3 million, I think is fine. Massive pay increase for him. I don't think he's ever made more than $1.5 million. And again, like the guys like him around. The Blue Jackets have a ton of cap space. He's not going to break the bank. And now that he's not just a 100% face puncher, he's doing other things. He's drawing penalties. He's playing on the penalty kill. He's scoring the odd goal here and there. I am much less eager to flip him at the deadline, which was kind of my thought going into this summer. I was like, man, yeah, Provorov flip at the deadline, Kuraly flip at the deadline, Olivier flip at the deadline. But now I'm like, man, who would be really useful in the playoffs? Mathieu Olivier. So the extension will happen. I'm just not sure when. I am surprised that it hasn't happened already, quite frankly, but I'm interested to see what happens when it does. Like I said, I think 3 times 3 is about where I'm at. $1 million either way, or a year either way. Like 4 million for 2 years or 2 million for 4 years. Maybe not 4 million for 2 years. That seems like an awful lot of money for Mathieu Olivier. But my point still stands. He'll be here next year. It just remains to see how much longer after that. So we'll keep you updated on that. Now that I've spent a bunch of time talking about it, I assume that something will happen as soon as I finish recording, which is fine. But that's all I've got for today. Tomorrow we are going to talk about tomorrow night's game against the Flyers. Blue Jackets did not do great against the Flyers the last time these two teams faced off. That might actually have been one of their worst games of the season. So can they figure out how to not be terrible against the Flyers? We'll find out. We'll talk about it tomorrow. Thank you for listening, making this your first listen of the day every single day. Locked on Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, on YouTube, and you can find us on Twitter for now at LO_Blue Jackets. You can find me for now at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. And if you have comments, questions, criticisms, email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.